did economics, didn't learn much. I remember distinctly, I raced through school, got done in 3 years, just went year round, just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. And it was a shortcut. I missed a lot of opportunity to connect with people and network, but I figured I could just do it later. But I remember distinctly, it was my very last quarter of college. I was like, I can't wait to read books that I want to read.
Okay.
Right? So I went to Barnes & Noble, and the bestseller was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I was like, okay, let's read that. And that's where my mind opened up. I'm like, okay, I'm glad I read that after I got done with school, but that just kind of opened my mind up to this really crazy world of this business and living life on your own terms. I mean, that's part of why I start companies and ultimately why I came out here as well.
Love that.
And through that experience, right, you initially started that professional experience at the West Coast. And you were able to go into Central Growth and really dive into venture capital. What did you learn back then? And what were your takeaways of those learnings where you kind of applied to coming to Kentucky?
Yeah, so most of my corporate roles were in insurance. I worked for large insurance companies. Just to give you perspective on like the kind of things I would do. One of the companies was Aetna, so a very large organization. They were hiring for a financial underwriter. I knew nothing about it. So went through their training program, graduated top of the class. I come out to my desk and they literally hand me a stack of folders about this high off the table. And I'm like, well, when does this work due? They're like, oh, you have the month to do it. I'm like, why do you need a month to like go through the stack of folders? And I just didn't get it, but that's what everyone was doing. So I sat down and spent about a week just building some macros and a bunch of other automation tools. So then I could just take that and just do my work. The first 15 minutes of every week, it would get done and print it off at my boss's desk. I did that a few times. They're like, look, you need to do something else here. So just continue to do that, but we're gonna help you understand like what else you can do here. And so I was very fortunate to have folks that would help me understand like where you can go, just classic mentoring. And after going through that experience and kind of moving that organization and corporately moving into other situations, I was given an innovation role at a very large corporate company out of the West Coast. And my entire job was to just talk to startups every single day, figure out what's in the market, what's new, how can we adopt some of what they do into our company, how do we create partnerships. And that's where I personally got involved on Sand Hill Road, understanding who the investors were, what they were looking for, what companies were coming out. And one of the things that was glaringly clear was there was too much money going to people that didn't really know what they're doing, right? So it's that classic situation where if you work corporately, you're always like, man, I can do my boss's job. He's not that bright. I'm actually doing his work and I'm not getting paid what he's getting paid. The same goes in the investment world. So you may see a headline of a company getting $20, $50, $100 million Series E or something. Don't be mistaken that the Series E means it took them 5 attempts plus to get to that point. They still don't know what they're doing most of the times. That's why they're not profitable. But just understanding that I could compete in that arena was super, humbling, because you're sitting there thinking, why can't I be on that side of the fence? And then the reality was you can't be. So that was the one thing that was glaringly obvious, dealing with Sand Hill Road, startup community, founders. There's a lot of smart people, but there's also a lot of money and people looking for opportunity to invest in.
Yeah, that whole lot of money. And so that experience really opened up a lot of thought process for you, right? And you kind of gave me your family dynamics and living there and having that exposure, but then also being open to the ideas and maybe I can relocate and still make this impact. Because I think for a while you told me that you would have left the West Coast. That was your thought process. Like, I was here to stay and never want to leave.
That's correct. So anytime you live in an area where you could be like 1 hour away from Napa, 2 hours from Monterey, 2 hours from Tahoe, an hour away from San Francisco. It's a playground. It really is a playground. And it's the reason why that, the real estate there is so expensive. And I'll never forget, it was like Thanksgiving. I was probably 22. Went to my grandma's house. But it's Thanksgiving, and I'm still wearing flip-flops and sandals. And we had family from out of town. They're like, "Aren't you cold?" I'm like, "No, this is California. Like this is winter." So yeah, I had this mindset where I was like, I don't want to live in snow. I don't want to live in a place that's cold, below 30 degrees. And just stuck in your bubble. It's just not healthy. And I started to explore, travel, and see Atlanta, go to Florida. I actually went to the Midwest, so Des Moines, Iowa, Omaha, Nebraska, Alaska, just to go travel and just see what's out there. And the very first thing you notice, like, people are people. And in fact, people are friendlier outside of California. So I still love all my Californians, but you start to realize there's a whole other world that exists outside of your own bubble. And when you start to become open to it, it becomes infectious. You just want to know what other people are up to, how they do things. Is it different than how you would do it? Why? Just kind of open that whole world up to me.
So once you got that your world's opened up and you started having an idea of, okay, I relocate, we close to my family in Kentucky. Around what time was that relocation taking place while you're working on Traffk?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So my last corporate gig, no surprise, our CEO of the company had left. He took a leave of absence and he said, "I'm not coming back." I said, "Okay, you brought me into this business." and who they replaced him with was an individual that I didn't get along with, but only because he was the purported talking head with a smile and credentials. I was the guy actually doing. So it was a lot of, okay, so what was that? Can you explain that to me? Could you make a deck? And then all of a sudden he's having meetings and getting all the accolades. And I'm like, well, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. So that got found out really quickly. I said, this isn't going to work. I left, and I'll never forget, he had actually called me into his office, and he was like, "You're right, Paul, this isn't going to work. Your position's been eliminated." I'm like, "Eliminated?" I'm like, if I'm not here, no one's making money. And so he's like, "Well, it's been eliminated." I go, "Oh, that's fine." So we worked out a package, which became my seed money to start my first advisory business. And I decided to take the stairwell because I wanted my cell phone signal to still work. Went down the stairwell and I'm calling what effectively became my first client. I said, "Hey, his name's Vineet. Hey, Vineet, you said there was a time that if I was ever available, just give you a call. I'm available. I'll give you a call." So, "All right, Paul, just check your email in about 5 minutes." So I'm still walking to my car, unlock the car, get in, say a little prayer, like, man, something needs to work here. And looked at my email, and it was a consulting agreement.
Wow.
So it replaced all my income, and then he even threw extra in there just to cover benefits for my family. He knew my family's situation. And that was my first client. And after that, I was like, well, why did he make that leap in 5 minutes? Was it just a leap in 5 minutes for him? The reality was no. I was doing what I did for years, and people see the value in it. And if they see the value and they want to place their bet on you, they'll go ahead and do it. So that's how I took that jump out. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's a cool job, man. That's a great story. I didn't know that. And so that firstly probably gave you confidence. Okay, so you started doing the consulting business, working deeper and deeper. You still had all your healthcare, insurance knowledge, and then probably started seeing additional opportunities. And during this time, were you still in the West Coast now?
Still in the West Coast.
Still in the West Coast.
So quite literally, I'm going down to Silicon Valley because word started spreading. There were tech companies that would literally say, "Hey, Paul, we heard you're really good with helping startups, founders, and figuring out how to go-to-market fit." And I would say that I would help people shave, a couple rounds of funding off, right, to help with their dilution strategy or anti-dilution strategy. So I would get these calls and people were like, hey, we're thinking about raising another round, we're not sure what we need to do, we're trying to sell into this market, our B2B strategy isn't working, like, can you come help us? So I'd go and help them. It was always a deal where they'd pay some kind of retainer. I'd ask for equity, and then I'd always have the ability to take what they had and then commercialize it myself, right? So there was these other streams. So I did well doing that, but it became obvious, like the founders were literally men and women that would come out of like a Stanford. They knew someone on Sand Hill Road, and they'd say, okay, so what's the next $1 trillion industry that needs tech? They point at healthcare or insurance or financial services. It's okay, well, what are we gonna call our company? They pick some name. Okay, well, what are we gonna do? What are you gonna digitize? Okay, so the deck was really light, like obscure, but they would take that to Sand Hill Road because they were connected with people there. They're like, okay, we'll take a flyer on you, we'll give you $10 million. And then they burned through $10 million because they would hire all their friends, get a building that looks like this, but in California, where their burn was just stacking up, and they had no viable product. So they would literally come to me and say, hey, we're on Series C. I'm like, who are your clients? Well, we're still going after our first one. I'm like, the first one, you're Series C. Like, this is interesting. Well, how did you get to Series C? Like, well, we have some proprietary technology. I was like, that no one wants. Like, that doesn't work. But yeah, just kind of seeing how all that kind of panned out, I would go in and help them understand where to take it, draw these very linear lines for them. When they start to see like sales come in, they start to make better hires, they take off. Half of the companies I worked with before are still around, which is nice that I was a part of some of their strategy, but it just became obvious, like I need to, not that I'm giving up my secrets or how to be successful, but kind of use them for myself to build my own platform. So that's where I was like, okay, what can I do?
Yeah.
And coming from the world of insurance, the one thing that I saw was I'd be sitting as an underwriter across from a room full of actuaries and all these other departments, and I'm looking at equations on the wall of pricing and database and server rooms in the back, and I'm like, well, why aren't we using that data to actually do our job? And they were like, well, that's just not what we do. Like that data is that department's data. It doesn't come to us. I'm like, but if you did, you'd be way smarter than you are today. Like, and it was just, it was mind-boggling like that. They couldn't understand that. So I say, you know what? Let me start my first company. That was Traffk, and that's literally taking the supply chain of how an insurance company manufactures an insurance product. And I said, let's just build all of that in the cloud, so it doesn't have to be anywhere. And we can make the processes faster. We can ingest data quicker, and that's what it became. Basically, a virtual insurance company. And like the rest was history. I got hooked on building.
And what year is this?
2015. That's
2015.
Yeah, that's what it was.
So you formed the company 2015, and 2 years later, you're relocating here, correct? While you're in the midst of building that company.
Yep.
So what was some of that transition look like? Like you were building this, I think, mostly remote company back then.
Yeah.
Moving to a new state, less connections, but you have these connections still in the West Coast that you can lean on and have a great relationships with. But doing that, did you raise capital early on? And then what did it look like relocating that company to almost across the country into a new area?
Yeah. So everything I do is we try to leverage the cloud. So this whole pandemic movement of being virtual and remote, distributed, like I was already doing that. So we did raise money, and we always try to go after super we call them super angels, where they're like they have their own family office, but they decide like, hey, I'll help you out. But went after super angels, got some money in. I think we brought in like $2 million to start. built out the platform, kind of made a few pivots to kind of figure out exactly what we're doing. But I just remember as we were looking for talent, we were like, do we find talent in California? And I was like, well, no, like we'll do an Indeed ad and see where the talent comes in from, and then deal with it like in real time. And so a lot of the talent, for just the craziest reason, came out of it was the DC area, and it was someplace I still don't know the name of it, in Ohio. That's where our data scientists came from, and our CTO came from DC. And I remember interviewing them, and they're like, do I have to relocate? I'm like, you have to be willing to relocate. I'm not gonna make you. They're like, yeah, that's cool. And so we worked well enough that we were to get on the video chats, again, well ahead of the pandemic, and it worked beautifully. And I was like, okay, so everyone that comes in, let's just make sure that they do video chat. They didn't know otherwise. Like, we just hopped into the flow.
Yeah.
It just worked out.
Yeah, cool. And what did it look like? So you got the hiring in place, all remote. So then you physically moved where you were at. And so how did you integrate in Kentucky originally? And
It's easy. Just it doesn't take much. But I just remember looking for a house like to come out here, and just knowing that you can have more space. So like, I know you say you went to California for a bit.
Yeah, I was in the Bay Area.
Okay, we gotta talk.
Yeah, we do.
Do you know about Asmaras, Addis Ababa? Okay, we'll talk about that too. But yeah, just the vibe was interesting. Looking for a house in California, you either had no backyard, no side yard, or like if you stood between two houses, you're touching the houses, and everything's overpriced. Here, it just shocked me that no one had a fence around their backyard. I was like, why don't these people have fences? Are they scared like someone's gonna break in or steal from them? But it was just so much more land. I like that because I always appreciate the outdoors. And right when we were leaving California, it's still massive drought. I remember like one of the final straws, I had got a fine from the code enforcement of the city we were living in because I was watering my grass on the wrong day of the week.
wow.
And so I remember I got this thing on my door, and I'm like, what is this? I thought it was a joke. And it referenced some letter, and I was like, I never got the letter. So I looked it up online, and it literally said, if your house ends in an odd number, you water your lawn or whatever you want to do, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then if it's even numbers, the other days of the week. I'm like, so again, like we come out here, we're looking around, I'm like, I don't see sprinklers anywhere. Like, it's just green. So like for me, the transition was super easy. I get along wherever, but I just remember going to the grocery store a couple of times, and I'm the kind of guy that if I make eye contact with you, I'll be like, hey, what's going on? And people are like, good, like, how are you? Are you from here? I just have a 5-10 minute conversation. You just left feeling like you were human again. And like, I literally forgot like what that true, genuine feeling of being human and like connecting with people. It wasn't like objective driven, like, oh, I need something from you, or I hope they can help me with something, but just being human.
Yep.
Like that was the one thing that just stood out. I was like, I poked around Nulu and a couple other places that were up and coming. I'm like, this feels like home. That made the transition super easy.
Yeah, I think even last year, like somebody human again and having that genuine connection with people you want to connect with was something that I learned as well, and had an opportunity to be home with family more, having that quality time. My wife was walked in, and having that time with the family and my kids again was really something that I appreciated again last year, and having that space. So hearing that, it gives me, I definitely hear where you're coming from with that. And you also mentioned to me, I remember us having a conversation, and you were talking about other founders you knew on the West Coast, right? And one of their big goals was if they had an exit, right?
Yeah.
What would they do, right? And they said they were buying big house, all this land, and some people like farming,
That's correct,
and
yeah.
he was like, well, one of the benefits of this coming to the Midwest, you can have that now rather than have your company.
It's happening now, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really like, boom. So what other benefits have you seen from being located here opposed to the West Coast? And building your company?
Yeah, and maybe this is just me, but in California, when I was looking to raise money or just even commercializing, I kept having to fly to New York. And I'm like, the Sand Hill Road's right here. But just what I was doing, it was always New York money was involved with insurance and financial services. And so, once I figured out like, okay, Louisville has an airport, and in fact, like not too far away, in a pinch, if you have to go to Nashville or Cincinnati or one of the other regionals, I was like, so I can get anywhere, like West Coast, like up to Michigan. I've been to Michigan a few times, Florida or Texas. Like you can literally be anywhere like, a day trip. Like that was a game changer. Like you weren't losing time, and you created more sprawl. That was super helpful. So I mean, that's one huge advantage. And then the other advantage is just the common sense way of doing business. So if you think about both coasts, raising money and building a business, literally you're starting a company to raise money for the next round of funding. So like you start a business, okay, is our idea good enough to raise X amount of money at X valuation? Yes, okay, that's your business. You're not in the business of whatever you say you're doing. You're in the business of raising the next round of funding. I just thought that it was just odd. But here I found like people were like, that's great, you have X, Y, and Z company. What's your revenue? How many clients do you have? Like, can you grow that? It was like this really tactical, old school business kind of thinking. And I'm like, yeah, this is how it should be. I just found that to be just really refreshing. And for the businesses that I build, just easier to find capital or people that are willing to help you commercialize because you actually have something of substance rather than just ether in a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I hear you on that too. I think, hearing your background, you have this, but you also have this unique network, right? That you were able to bring here and understand. So I think having revenue, having customers is impactful, it's important. But I think a lot of times it's like, okay, but how do I find that capital to even get started that I need? How have you been able to maneuver that? Have you found that locally, or is it still kind of based off the relationship you kind of built on the West Coast? And how should founders start thinking about that as they're building their companies? Because I think you're right, revenue is important, but having seed money is also necessary.
Yeah, I always follow the path of least resistance. That has to do with raising money and running your business. You go where the relationship is. So I don't know too many people here locally. I'm getting to know more people. So like the folks at Render, Endeavor team, things of that nature, they really put me on to just understand who's here and just have conversations. That's been really interesting. And to see the receptivity back, it's been massive. But still, I always rely on just my personal network. And at this point, it's wherever people are at. So, especially with the pandemic, I've had a lot of people that I knew in New York. They say, I'm out of here. They're now in Atlanta. And they're not really in Atlanta, they're outside of Atlanta because they don't want to deal with the traffic or whatever. But people are just sprawling out. So that's still my word of wisdom when it comes to running your business. You just have to work your network, figure out what relationships can get you to whatever milestone you're trying to get you the fastest and quickest. But yeah, it doesn't matter where you're at. It just does not matter where you're at.
No, I fully agree. I think most of us saw that last year. You were already ahead of the curve and saw that right now. You see everyone adjusting remote. It's more of a thing. That's right. You got to hire remotely now if you want to be competitive and find the talent. We realized that a lot of times in the office we weren't always efficient, right? It's times in person is great to have that, but realize that you can, especially with technology, you can be more efficient.
More efficient.
Being home, travel time for your employees there and back, and we realized that we were stuck in a lot of old ways, and we kind of sped up last year with 2020. And so now you even look at this area, you're right? Lower cost of living, larger houses, you need to raise less capital to run, your businesses, your burn rate is doubled now. And so you have this long runway building your companies. And we're seeing that more and more business unlock in this environment. So for you, I know your hands are heavily involved in a lot of different things, but talk to me when you got here from starting your business in 2015, where Traffk was there with your first couple of clients, and to where you kind of got to the point you got to now since being located here.
Oh yeah, wow. So starting Traffk, we probably pivoted 2 or 3 times. We started off as an analytics company first, because I was all about the data. So if you want to figure out some competitive advantage, you have to be smarter, and insurance is a game of inches. So if you have hundreds of billions of dollars flowing through an insurance company, if you figure out a way to shave off 1 or 2 or 3%, that doesn't sound exciting, but it compounds in insurance environments. As an analytic company, we figured it out. But the problem that we ran into was trying to convince very large insurance companies like a New York Life or Prudential or Guardian, like, hey, we figured out how to do what you do, just better. They're like, no, like we hired a team of 50 data scientists, just hired a new CTO, some other innovation officer. We invested, $75 million in our new IT infrastructure that only fixes 1/10 of what we actually need to fix. No, there's no way. So you got these like hard objections because of the mindset. It was like you cannot do what we do better than we can. That was tough. We picked up a few clients, but then we started to quickly learn, like, what if we just do what they do? Like, what do they actually manufacture? Will they create the product? So we figured out a way to pivot and just create our own like life insurance products and take them to market. We own the entire stack. So again, they were told, oh no, that's going to be very complicated, and you're going to deal with too many pieces. But we figured it out and did it. And so if you think about the founding point, we maybe had our first $1 million come in. Then we maybe did like $1 million every year after. So maybe all in, up until last year, maybe $6 million in capital, right? To have a company that's, last term sheets in that we were able to kind of get through a $300 million company. That's leverage. That's leverage. But I think like not too many stories are told, like the nastiness of being an entrepreneur, and kind of like people always default to hyperbole. Oh yeah, I went to New York and I had dinner with the Apollo group. It's like, no, you went to New York and you sat next to a table where some guy said he worked at Apollo. It's 2 different things. Or they say, well, we raised money and did X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, you didn't do it that way. Like there's a whole other side to how you can run a business more efficiently. But those stories just have to get told rather than just hyperbolized and then made other founders feel like they can't get there. Yeah. Because the path isn't clear. Yeah. So that's what excites me the most about being here. Yeah. Because it feels like every time I run into someone, even coming here and meeting everyone in here, I haven't met you yet. Alex? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Just through LinkedIn. But everyone I've met, brilliant people working on some brilliant ideas that are equally as competitive as anything else out there. Like to figure out a way to scale and map and help others map just a greater level of aspiration and execution. That's just, I think, what I'm built for. Yeah. So I look forward to that.
I know we have a lot of conversations. I hear that passion come out of you already. I'm here today too. But what are, you said, efficient businesses being able to run more efficiently and being tactical? Are there 1 or 2 things that you can drop on us that you learned that help you become more efficient and really is more tactical day to day, for opposed to, like you said, the race of like just raising capital?
Yeah, it's probably just always thinking thinking like the bootstrapping. I mean, like never let that die. I remember one of our capital raises. One of our investors was like, Paul, you need to hire some kind of chief of staff person to keep your schedule going. And I said, no one's that busy. No one is that busy, and there is some technology out here that will do that for me. He was like, well, what do you mean? Don't you need a secretary kind of person, admin person? Like, no, like I actually want to be in the flow and know what's happening. I don't want to be too far removed. Or you need to put some budget in there for that person. Maybe you need 2 for the team. I'm like, nah, I think we should just meet more often and make sure we all share a calendar. Right, so it's like those mindsets of needing to like, create bloat in your CapEx. That there's a lot of waste from what I've seen in companies. Even ones that say that they're bootstrapping. Do you really need an office?
Fancy office?
Fancy office? There's just little things like that. And in fact, investing more in technology. So like every once in a while, my new encyclopedia is YouTube. So I'll look at, top 10 apps to run a business off of. And I guarantee you there will be apps that you guys have never seen, but people are running like $100 million companies off of 5 apps that you've never heard of, right? So whether it's, and it's not, we're not talking QuickBooks, we're not talking social media. These are companies that literally create leverage in your company. Those are just 2 ways to run more efficiently.
I love the last one too. I mean, both of them are important, but I think being more efficient with technology, knowing where to cut your costs is important, right? I think the biggest one right now is actually digging an office in that way. And so a lot of times half that money went to leasing office space, inefficiently running ads, say 30% of venture dollars go back to Facebook and Google. And you can see like those kind of things that I think are important, but I think really understand always having that bootstrap mindset. I think Rick and I talk about this quite a bit, and he's definitely embodies the saying that, hey, let me run this on my own. But at the same time, I'm curious what your thoughts about the process. Like always bootstrapping, but when do you decide, okay, this is capital that I need for scale, and I can do more by spending some capital instead of having that bootstrap mindset? Because I think at times you can get in the clutter to do all your own. You need to add that, whether it's technology or additional hires in order to scale faster.
Yeah, so most of the hires that I make, I call them, we call it internally, we're looking for Draymond Green. Okay, so someone that will go do it all. Like, they will shoot a 3-pointer, they will talk trash, they will block a shot, they will go dive for a ball, or they'll just be on the sidelines still talking, like keeping it going.
Yeah.
Like that's who we try to find, just utility players. So that's where I found like this secret way to navigate bootstrapping. Find someone that has. They don't have to be awesome at everything or even one thing. They just have to be curious, and they don't mind like getting in and getting dirty. We found that to be wildly successful. It's like the secret pitch we give to people. We're like, look, what do you want to be in 5 years? Well, I want to lead a development team, or I want to lead a team of data scientists. I'm like, okay, what if we gave you that option and the option to run your own business, like line of business? Really? Like, that's because we make you a utility player. That's a good way to bootstrap, because that also means if you're trying to make something happen, so you get your team's input on it, you might ask, like, who wants to take this on? And you'll get the hungry one that says, I'll do that. And then you'll figure out, like, they'll actually move it forward. It's super interesting in a team dynamic.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think the utility players are a great way to look at hiring instead of having these certain roles and seeing curiosity, the skill sets, and then also, I see the empowering people and giving the opportunity to lead. You'll get more out of people.
Right.
Having that ownership around that.
I mean, granted, when you want to scale, you need to throw some cash at a problem. Like wherever you throw cash at a problem, it's highly specialized.
Okay.
Like if we need legal counsel, we will make sure it's good legal counsel. It may be expensive, but we'll literally we always like, just tell whoever we bring on, if it's an outside resource, whatever you do, it needs to be template.
Okay.
So we can just use it over and over and we're like, okay, no problem. So that's typically how we do it. So we might spend heavy on those specialized things, but we do it in templated fashion. So even we need a development help. You could mess around and get a junior analyst or junior staff. We'll go after top tier staff. We'll overpay them and say, your responsibility is to create the template for how we do our business, do your job and run the business. So they're actually minting like the playbook. So if they do wash out or they don't continue with the company, you can now put someone that's less senior in that role because they have this template. So just being smart, trying to stay ahead.
Yeah, like I love the documentation that we call it the template, having that internal processes. It's important. You never know when you can lose talent or have to replace that. Those are the biggest gaps. Currently now, how large is your team now? And primarily where are the locations now with them? Is it primarily in the Midwest? Are you looking at it as far as time zone, or are you averse to time zones in different matters of country?
Yeah, so if we're talking traffic, we're talking probably 80 people spread throughout Florida, DC, St. Louis, Philly. That's kind of like the regions that the team sits in. Yeah. And then the other portfolio companies, again, they're all over. So some are still back in California, Atlanta. That's like the two biggest probably spots for us. And they try to grow a presence here.
I love that. Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, knowing that I've seen more and more, like I was mentioned earlier, people being remote, and now people are like, oh, it should no longer be about what city or state. Maybe it's more about time zones, that people be more aligned that way and hiring a certain time zone and making sure you don't have maybe this East Coast, West Coast thing unless you have a business that runs 24/7 like that. You want that, but I think that's something that I'm seeing more of, and we have all of the virtual tools to be able to run the team that way. And how do you look at that setup now? So are your team mostly working from home? Are you giving them like virtual office spaces? Is there certain tools you make sure that you require your team to have?
Yeah, so we're, one of our early partners is Microsoft. So we got into Teams before Teams even launched. They're like, oh, try this new collaboration tools and test them. So we're looking at them and testing them. We're like, oh, this is awesome. That's our daily driver. We have our phones, laptop. That's how we text, communicate. We'll be on a call, like teamsing each other. That's our daily driver. But yeah, other than that, we made available having like co-working space or an office available, so they kind of get together in pods whenever they need to. No one used it.
Really?
So we're like, okay, like that's done.
Okay.
So we just have right now we just have a light presence at some Regis space downtown that we have. If we need to like converge on a place, we just pick a Regis location. We've been getting used to Airbnb of all things. So we might have a need to get the developers together. We might say, hey, who can make it? Maybe it's like a team of 7. Like, who can make it out of a team of 7 into one place? 5 of them say they can make it. Okay, great. So we just get a big Airbnb. It's all like camp out there, and dining room, living room, and command central. And yeah, so that's fun because you can make it like kind of different locations and stuff. But yeah, we just try to bust it up.
I like that a lot, man. I think it's really cool. Before we even wrap up, I want to open up for the room for any Q&A for you as well, and I can give everyone an opportunity to ask a question if they have anyone.
That's fine.
For you as well.
So was it purely just, you liking the environment that drove you to Kentucky, and the location, obviously, being able to get to places quickly?
No, it was definitely family. Yeah, so that's a long, complicated story, but yeah, yeah. My then wife was from here, so we met out there, and vowed I will never move to Kentucky. And we started visiting out here, and I would poke around. I'm like, it's really nice, like buy a new place, and it actually felt more like home than it did in California, which tripped me out. So I'm like, Mr. California, and I'm like, I feel so at home here. Like, so yeah, made the move out here. Been loving it ever since.
So you had 80 FTEs, or how much of that contract employees or was all W-2 hourly work?
It feels like now about 70% FTE, 30% contractor.
Have you found one works better than the other with being all remote?
Yeah, like in my personal opinion, contractors work the best. And that's typically because we'll give them the option and say, hey, how do you want to get paid? The smart ones say, oh yeah, just pay me through my LLC. And then like they stick around for a long time because they're just like, they just do whatever they do. And we treat them super well, but then you just have to watch out for labor laws and things that might kick you later. But yeah, they're the ones that are the most productive. And if you hire a contractor, or an independent contractor to fill a role, if they already have an LLC, they're already business minded. And if you bring them into your business and expose them to non-technical aspects of the job they were hired, they typically latch onto it and become a business leader, which is super interesting. That's something I've found over the last maybe 10 years. But yeah, if I could hire all independents, I would.
You talk about a little bit more about bootstrapping. So you talked about you raised it at initial $2 million of seed capital, and then what about the rounds in between there? So what did those look like? Did you?
Yeah, so it was always about $1 million each time, about $1 million a year, and the reason why we do it that way, we said let's do it that way. That's one, but two, we would try to make sure we would have corporate clients paying us. So the name of the game for us, the first probably 3 or 4 years, we want to get our hands on proprietary data to build our own derivative data sets from it. And rather than go try to convince someone to do a proof of concept or to pay for a data set, we would go to large corporations and say, hey, we can show you insights into your data no one else can. They'd be like, really, how? Like, well, you have to do business with us or us to show you that. But basically that was the pitch. And fortunately we were able to map some of our relationships and connections into some of these B2B engagements. And so we got paid to acquire the data that we were after in the first place. Those were paying revenue generating customers. So it didn't require us to go have to raise capital to accomplish the same thing. And then we just did not want to dilute ourselves. So even to this day, I think I own a third of the Traffk business. And I would suspect we're probably 2 rounds away from going public, maybe, if we wanted to. So we'll see. I'm not a fan of going public. That's another conversation.
Why not?
Put it this way. So Chris alluded to it earlier. So when I was in California working with these startups in Silicon Valley, and they're all talking about their ambitious dreams of being a unicorn, et cetera. Like, what are you going to do if you actually got an exit and you retain a good liquidation stake? What would you do? You're like, oh man, I would move out to some place and just have a farm, 100 acres, horses. I'm like, so why don't you just go do that now? Like, I don't understand. Like, what are you waiting for? It's almost that exact same answer. That's the same answer I would give to the other. Just mindset, I guess.
Yeah. I see that.
Yeah.
I see that. It all depends on what your end goal is, right?
All about your end goal. Yeah. So I mean, like those in between rounds, if you have to raise money, just don't dilute yourself. I think sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle. Negotiating with investors is still it's the art of negotiation. It's being creative. I think it's the most creative art form that there is raising capital. You can put some deals together that are super intriguing. you an example. Most will grab a safe note from Y Combinator and go. Others will say, well, let's raise money at some valuation, let's all agree on it and go, right? But rarely does a founder ask, what return does the investor want, right? So here's one hack. Ask the investor, what return do you want on your money? I guarantee you whatever they say, just add 5% to it, and then show them a deal that looks like that with no equity. They'll take it. They always take it because they know they're going to get their money back. If they don't, they may have warrants against your business, but they don't care about your equity. The equity is another form of a warrant. But if they say, yeah, I need to get 20% back on my money by when? The next 5 years. I'll give you 25% back. 4 years. And they go, okay, that's a good deal. Like it's, there's ways to get after it, but and debt is friendly as well. It's good leverage. But yeah, so I'm not interested in going public because I believe you can just use those scenarios to create a business that's sustainable that can fund other businesses. So I am in the business of being my own bank ultimately. So that's why I have multiple companies, and I want to help other founders do what they have to do without being diluted, but having infrastructure and team and people that can help them. I think that's another model has to emerge. You see it sometimes, but yeah, we're talking to some founders, even here in the region, where it may not seem like it would make sense to have them as a part of our portfolio. But I know the tech developers that I have in one of my companies and the media person I have in another company, both of them will help that new founder. And then all of a sudden they know who to hire, they can get a jump start on their MVP, and just do some things better. Yeah, so going public is, I don't know, pressure, regulation.
You don't want to really own the company.
Yeah, you don't own the company.
Yeah, I definitely can hear you on that for sure. Anything else before we close out today?
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Paul, for joining us today. I really love some of the gems you dropped today. I think a lot of founders probably thinking right now, especially that last piece of being creative on some deals and working with venture capitalists and how to negotiate deals and thinking of new innovative ways to fund your business, but absolutely make great partnerships. That's what it's all about, right? If we, end of the day, you want to make great deals. So if everyone's happy from the table, you having your own ownership and not being diluted, but also returning funds like a venture firm or an investor, that sounds a great alignment to me. And I think it's something that we all very will walk away from today. Right, let's get creative. So again, I know coming up more, and I appreciate congrats on all your success. Sitting here to and this is first, and I didn't ever have the opportunity to talk to you a few times, and I know incredible things you're doing, and then now it's been highlighted in this community. And I think many people are now getting to know you as well, and it's a pleasure to have you today.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. You're doing great work here. Again, I'm not blowing smoke. I've met some cool people today. You're doing some amazing things, and you should have more visibility in some seats. If I can be helpful to any one of you, I would love to. But yeah, appreciate just being part of the community.
All right, absolutely. Well, we'll kick it off. We have a happy hour, so thank you all again.